The impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Deborah. It is vampires, and there's a host of damned souls at Pelham House.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
Well, he's dead. Can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio, the flagship show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Irene and Mark, and tonight with me I have a plethora of hosts. Mark Johnson.
Number 1.
Andy Mercer.
Number 2.
And Deborah Hatswell.
Number 3.
Number 3. Okay, right. So we haven't got a guest tonight because there's too many of us. You know, we all want to talk tonight, don't we? Don't we want to talk?
Yeah, you can't shut us up half the time anyway. So, you know, we've just getting us rambling should make for a good show. We always have something interesting to talk about.
Yeah, and the first thing we've got to talk about, what did you think of the wedding?
What wedding?
Yes, Andy.
Well, like I said to you before, the first time I ever came on here, I'm one of the 25% of the UK population who's a Republican, as in get rid of all of them. So no, I would rather watch paint dry.
Yeah,
so, there you go.
I know you wouldn't. I know you're not a big fan of the wedding.
That's an understatement.
And what about you, Deborah? Did you watch it?
I didn't watch the actual wedding, I'll be honest. I went to the woods, but I did watch the highlights later on. And I am very similar to Andy. I don't have a very large royalist streak, but I do like to see a couple who are genuinely in love get married. And I think that's what we were watching. Yeah, they look very happy, the pair of them, I've got to be honest.
Well, speaking as the non-Brit in the room, I caught some of it, not all of it. I was in the middle of getting ready to leave to go to New York City to see a show that day. So, but I caught some of it. It was really interesting. My favorite was the Black American pastor giving his sermon on love, and the horrified reaction from the Brits looking at this guy, going, "Who the hell is this bloke?"
Honestly, Deborah, you should have seen that. You should have seen their faces. You know, they all looked like they were stuck in plums. Honestly, it was. And even I was sitting there going, "Oh, for Christ's sake, mate, get on with it." You know. Shut up.
Yeah, we don't do that as Brits, do we? We just get them in, get them wed, get them out.
I think he rattled for about half an hour. All about love, you know.
But who was this person? Where did he come from?
No idea.
He was Episcopalian.
I think they were trying to incorporate her religion. They were trying to incorporate her religion into it. Maybe he was her pastor, or they wanted to just bring in an American pastor to, you know, show the US and UK whatever.
How not to do it.
I thought a mum looked incredibly proud.
Oh, she did.
Yeah, that was what I got from that day. Her mum looked incredibly proud of her.
But she looked so lonely.
Yeah.
I really did feel sorry for her sitting there on her own.
I did. But she did. She looked incredibly proud of her daughter, didn't she? That was lovely.
Yeah.
The Queen looked like she was dirtying her drawers the whole time.
Sorry, darling. What did you say?
I said the Queen looked like she was dropping a deuce the whole time.
I thought she was going to fall asleep at one point when that pastor was on. She really did look like she was dozing off. Either that or she was putting her head down and cursing like a Billy O.
Oh, so she's 90 odd, isn't she? So she probably was falling asleep.
I would imagine so. It's a long day, isn't it, when you're in your 90s? I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I like the memes that have been floating around social media, which shows the Queen giving Meghan Markle a nasty look, and they're saying how to plot a second car accident or something along those lines.
Too soon.
Tell him, Deborah.
Oh, oh! Did you see that? Didn't they leave a seat for Diana? I think they left an empty seat or something like that for Diana. I thought that.
Yes, I heard that. That's one bit I did hear about.
Yeah, it's a bit ironic. Really? Yeah, it's still a very touchy subject for the Brits, isn't it? That it's something we kind of avoid talking about. Really, you can still get done for treason in England.
That doesn't stop people, though. Generally speaking, talking about it.
Hey, Deborah, I love you. I love the northern accent, but you're going very fast. I need a translator.
I know. I really do need to slow things down. I realise when I get excited, my accent takes over. I will tone it down and speak the Queen's English from now on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the dress, Deborah?
I thought she looked beautiful. I thought she looked absolutely beautiful. And I thought he looked incredibly happy. He looked so happy. It was nice to see.
I liked the dress. It was sophisticated. It wasn't over the top.
Yeah, she
did very, very well. And she's a British designer, isn't she? She's very good.
Yeah, she looked classy, didn't she? The whole thing looked classy. I think that's what I took from it. I really enjoyed it. But like I say, I was out in the woods in the day. We weren't researching. We just went up on a meet, to meet some people and some friends, and have a bit of a forage while we were up there.
Deborah, did you see the tiara, Queen Anne's tiara?
Yeah, I did.
I tell you what, that gave a new meaning to Sparkle the Markle.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
it really glinted,
Yeah.
For the briefest moment there, we almost had a paranormal show. Debbie was talking about being in the woods, and now we're back to talking about tiaras. So we're a wedding show again.
We'll get there in a moment. We have a lot of time to kill tonight.
We can change it. We can change this.
I'm more your Wellingtons and raincoat girl, me than diamonds. I'll be honest. I'm most often found in a muddy hole somewhere.
Yeah.
Kind of crumbled through something or over something or under something.
Hold on.
I'll tell you something, Deborah. Hang on a minute, Andy. I'll tell you something, Deborah. Something paranormal happened to me this weekend.
Oh, cool.
My old man, he had some sort of paranormal, I don't know, shift in consciousness, I think, because I ended up going out for one handbag, came back with two. A Versace and a the other one again, it's over there. Sugar, I can't remember. Anyway, one of them's a Versace.
Completely lost on me. Absolutely.
A Louis Vuitton.
I'm telling you, for my old man, that something paranormal actually happened. It must have.
I could buy an ATV. One handbag or an ATV. Oh, I'll have the ATV.
It was a Ralph Lauren.
Oh, right.
A Ralph Lauren. Yeah.
Oh, you should have got an invite to the wedding. You would have looked wonderful there, Irene, I would imagine. I'd have been round the back.
I didn't want to outshine anyone, because some of my costumes make theirs look terrible.
You mean you didn't receive an invitation from the Queen?
Shush, boys. No. Right. Hold on a second, Deborah. Let's go back now. We better let the producer take over. Not Mark.
Andy, I think Andy had a question.
I don't know if Mark's the producer for this one. I was just going to say, with Debbie talking about being in Raymack and Wellies in the woods, it took a very different kind of show for a moment there. It's a very late night show.
Luckily, I don't do it at night. I only do it in the day. But myself and many of the researchers have had extremely strange experiences in the woods that are not paranormal at times.
I was going to say, what are we talking about here?
Wait a minute. Raincoat, welly goggle, welly boots in the woods in the daytime. Isn't that a bit of an exhibitionist?
Well, that's what it's heading on that road at the moment. But I think we should perhaps explain what you actually are doing in those woods in case anyone missed it.
Well, yeah, that might help. What I do something that's incredibly strange to most people. I am a witness to what people call the British Bigfoot. I saw something kind of the cross between a man and an ape kind of thing, and I was only a girl when I saw it. And all these years later now, I found lots and lots of other witnesses to this, a similar thing. And myself and lots of people go out and we actually try and find similar things that the Americans and the Russians find around Bigfoot. Or I will go and meet the witnesses in the area where they had their sighting account, and I'll have a look around because I've been mapping these sightings for a very, very long time. So there's certain patterns that have shown up that I've noticed, like they tend to be around streams and rivers and small things like that. Lots of little things that I've been able to put together. So whenever I get the opportunity, I am usually found sat on a log surrounded by researchers who are out looking. My disability is not great, so I can't do all the tramping, but I will get there and then they will, tramp the woods and come back and we'll see if we've got any finds or any photographs. Just like your typical American Bigfoot researcher, really.
Where is, what would you say was the most densely populated, if you like, area for these kind of sightings, where they happen most commonly that you found?
My area, for one, because I'm in an incredibly urban area, but it does have, we have a river valley that runs through where I live called the River Irwell. And that's, and I think that may be why I saw him quite close. And there are 6 other witnesses from the 80s to 2017, there have been 6 witnesses to a very similar creature. That's one of them. The other one is Kite Chase, which is in Staffordshire. And there are lots and lots and lots of cryptid sightings there, not just Bigfoots, werewolves, pigmen, even
pigmen.
Yes, a man who had the body of a man.
I didn't know we were going to be talking about Lon Strickler on this program.
I know all about flying hedgehog man, hog pig.
No. There are strange reports around the Gentleshire area of Cannock Chase of this strange almost pig-headed type hairy man, and I never understood that you could see something that had like a pig type of head until I spoke to a lady who saw the same thing as me in the same area as me 2 years later. And when we both described the faces, it didn't seem to make any sense. I said he had like a flat nose like a boxer, and she said he had an almost snoutish nose like a pig. And I couldn't put the 2 and 2 together. And then I realised that I was laid down when I saw him and she was stood up. And I thought, it's just a matter of perspective, really. And then, you know the boxer, Chris Eubanks?
Yeah.
Yeah. He has that very similar flat nose to what I saw. But it's also...
So he's like a pigman.
Yeah, I think that's what they're describing. This almost...
boxer's nose.
Yes. I think that's maybe what they mean. Because you've got to know what you've seen, haven't you? And then you've got to be able to describe it to somebody else, which I'm sure Ron understands and has done many times. It's really hard to get what is in the witness's head down onto paper and then get it out across to other people to understand. And I wonder if it's just that gives it, where she said that it has this snout-like appearance, like a pig, you know.
Confusing. Obviously, it's a lot better if the witness is able to draw.
Yes. And then you have the problem of, firstly, you need a witness and a creature to have the actual sighting. And then that witness has to find somewhere to report it to. And that's incredibly easy in America. There's lots of places where they
but not so many over here.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then you've got to hope that they never say Bigfoot. They'll say ape man, man ape.
Yeah.
cross between a man and caveman comes up a lot. And it's always upright bear. It's always the word man in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the problem, you see. So I kind of do everything I can to come across these people and sitting down and talk to them and get them to give me a description and what time it was, what kind of the weather was like that day, what they were doing pre the sighting, what happened after the sighting. Just a general, sometimes talking to them helps them put the pieces together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, Mark has got Bigfoot in New Jersey, so we hear.
Up in North Jersey, yes, we have Big Red Eye. As
yes,
he's known.
He's only got one eye, and it was red.
You know what? I'm not the one who named him, so all I can say.
Oh, maybe he had one red eye and one blue.
It could be. Who knows? All I know is he gets spotted up here once in a while, and up in the northern part of New Jersey. Lots of Bigfoot reportings around not just my area, but around the whole northern part of New Jersey, going into Pennsylvania and upstate New York. It's such a densely forested area, especially when you start getting on the Pennsylvania side of things. So there's definitely a lot of habitat and thick woods for some creature to hide. And I have a friend who lives on the border of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, near Milford. They recently bought a house there, and they're having all sorts of activity happening around their property, and they even took some photos of what looks like a Bigfoot creature in a field. So definitely some stuff around here, and now that the weather is finally getting a little bit better, I'm going to get out and try to do my own little research and see if we can find anything.
Yeah, that'd be good. That would be good. Well, I'm afraid there isn't many Bigfoot around where Andy lives. Is there, Andy? No. Plenty of people with big feet, but not a Bigfoot, yeah?
Well, there's plenty of strange creatures in Essex, but they tend to be just human beings.
I think you'd be surprised there, Andy, actually.
Oh, I know my area very well indeed, Debbie. Don't worry about that. I've been on many strange adventures in this area. No, where I am, we're too close to London, Estuary, Essex. It's you get nothing around here. I mean, there's been occasional reports of black dog, which is something I do find interesting, but that's more of a mythic folklore creature.
Yeah, I've had shock reports, Andy, where they describe the shook and it has a human-like base.
Certainly the large black dog, there's been a few reports of those, which I have been interested in as well. But nothing of that kind of nature as in sort of Bigfooty kind of people. But there's some fairly scary people in this town, that's for definite. But they're only human beings, absolutely.
There is I'm just pulling my map up actually. There is a corridor though. There is a river corridor that comes from the Medway, that comes quite close to where you are, and there are hairy, upright hominids, shall we say, reports in that area. But I get what you mean. You're like me. You're quite close into town.
Yes, exactly. It's too urban round here for anything to really hide, if anything, more than a small dog, to be perfectly honest with you. But, I mean, I am not far from Epping Forest, and there's been some strange stuff at Epping Forest. Again, I've never seen anything that fits that kind of description, but certainly paranormal in terms of ghostly, supernatural stuff in Epping Forest, absolutely, definitely.
I mean, I'm looking, I don't know where you are, and I don't want to ask you on air, but there are a number I'm just looking from like the Isle of Sheppey to about Harlow. There is a circle of reports, and some are howls, and some describe them as like a werewolf creature. Lots and lots of big cat reports, lots and lots. I'm just checking my map now, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I count.
Deborah, talking about big cats, my husband we were sitting in the garden having coffee the other day, and he said that he heard on the radio about this cat, this woman, what she'd done. She's heard her bins being moved, her wheelie bins. So she looked on her CCTV camera, and there was a big cat, literally a big cat, shifting these bins around. Yeah. So she phoned the police, and the police phoned the nearest zoo. They come out, but they said that they hadn't got a cat missing.
I saw the report. I
did.
Yeah, I did. So, and it had the typical puma square. They have a normal square face, kind of, like a mountain lion,
yeah,
type thing, but very dark black, and it had that curl to the tail and the tip on the end. You could take that off as a tabby cat. That was a big cat that I saw that report. Yeah, it was a big, muscular black thing, wasn't it? When
she called it on CCTV, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. You just tend to find that in towns and cities, or say, like you're a new build, like where I am. So you're in the end of the town, and at the back of you is kind of green belt. You get a lot of cat reports in those areas, not just out in the wilds. They will come right into town if they're hungry. Yeah, there's one here near me called the Bolton Beast, and I think there are 22 witness accounts of this black cat, and a couple of them have been when it's been in the town itself. You know, I don't know cats. I'm really unfamiliar with cat behaviour, so I just be guessing.
Yeah. Well, anyway, what else we wanted to talk to you about, Deborah, was, well, Andy is your producer for the show.
Yes.
So Andy can talk about it.
I can indeed, yes. We're going to be having a new show on the network, which will be starting fairly soon, and Deborah is one of the co-hosts of the show, and it's the first time we've got a show that's specifically dedicated to cryptozoology, which is hence why, of course, Deborah is part of the team to be presenting that show. So we're all looking forward to getting that one up and running fairly soon.
And who's the other host?
And this is the other news, of course, that people who've been following us for a number of years will be interested. Here we have good old Ronald Murphy is returning to the airways of Paranormal UK Radio. He's the co-host with Deborah for this new show.
Yep, Ron Murphy is also coming back with. He'll be bringing back his old show, Inside the Goblin Universe, and he'll be doing that one as well as the new show with Deborah.
Very excited. I'm very excited. We can bring the American cryptids and the British cryptids together, probably for the first time ever, I would think, where it's been discussed with a British host and an American host in the same show consistently. Exciting times.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the plan, to cover, obviously, the Bigfoots both here and in America, and of course around the world, but all the other vast range of cryptid creatures that are reported sightings throughout the world. So it's going to be fascinating, particularly if that's your own personal interest area. Then it really is going to be a show to catch. But you guys, I know them both. They're both very good talkers. Unfortunately, Ron can't make it tonight. He's had to work, but it'll be interesting to see how the show goes. I think it's going to be really good fun.
And I'm in a very lucky position where I don't just come across Bigfoot reports. People report a spectrum of things to me because there isn't really anybody that's collecting them. And I'm a bit like the nosy neighbour. I like to know what's going on, and I make a note of things. So I thought, this is why I started the map. I thought I'll start putting them on the map because one day somebody might have a use for this information. So that's just why I started doing it, really. So I get a host of things that are reported to me right across the spectrum, from upright, corporeal, flesh and blood witnesses to right across to the paranormal, the strange, and I get pixie reports, I get goblin reports, I've had reports of shadow stealers, all kinds of strange and wonderful stories happen to come across my mailbox, fortunately.
Well, Deborah, I'm going to have to ask you about one of those right now that I have never heard of before. What is a shadow stealer?
There is a very famous place in Scotland called Schiehallion, and it is what has been claimed from old times is a fae, the fairy folk, as you would say. That's their land and their mountain, and it's a very special place because it has a number of strange things about it. Not only do a lot of ley lines meet there, it's also made mostly of quartz. So in a particular light, it does shine like a diamond, hence the name Fairy Mountain. But there is also two tales up there. One of them is that there are cave systems below Schiehallion, and many children would wander into the caves and completely disappear and would turn up the next day, maybe 24 hours, about 150 miles away at Rannoch or something like that. I probably got that wrong. But quite a ways away for these, and this happened continuously over and over, and it's part of our folklore. The other part of the folklore is the bog people, which are described as little brown elves, I would say, in leather hats and leather clothing. And there's a gentleman, and he gives this wonderful account of sitting there at the bottom of Schiehallion in the boggy land, where there's a waterfall. And I was lucky enough to visit there only last month, and it is a magical place. It was unbelievable. I was in awe, actually, when we were there. And he describes watching the waterfall and suddenly looking down, and he sees at his feet a female and male of these little bog people. Well, up there they call them the shadow stealers, and they had a pair of scissors and they were cutting out his shadow. Very strange story indeed. And he kind of shooed them up, and off they went and there's it sounds strange, but if you go all the way back in time, there is a tale from up there about the Pictish boy, and one of the earliest people to live in the UK were the Picts. And it's about these little brown boys that haunt the bogland up at Schiehallion. So, yeah, that's the story of the shadow stealers.
That is very interesting. You know, there's so much about British folklore, mythology of the little people, and there's so many different names for the little people in mythology as well. But it seems like a lot of times they are talking about the same types of creatures, possibly.
Yeah, very similar. There's one at Slitting Mill, a couple driving in the car, and they have to stop the car, and 3 very small, brown hairy men walk across the road in front of the car. And there are others. I've not got my maps to hand at the moment. There are other accounts of similar, quite small. Some people call them boggarts. Other people call them bull beggars. There tends to be regional names as well. So names that you get up in the north, you don't get down south. And just people report consistently over time these little folk that normally run away and can be quite mean.
Well, interestingly.
Well, what do they do? Bite your ankles?
No, it's mean. They're quite the opposite of what you would imagine a fairy. Disney have done a number on fairies. They're not these little, lovely little floaty things that fly about. They're mean and they steal and they cause trickery and they upset people. So you would leave offerings out for them. What most Americans would call gifting, like milk or honeycomb or food out in the woods.
We call it bribing.
Yes, the bribery. On your step, and people would notice that horse blankets would go missing. They would put it down to the boggarts or the bull beggars or the fairy folk or the goblins, whatever regional name you had for said little hairy brown creature that annoyed you on your farm. Now, some people are saying, is the wild man, the Bigfoot, is this all mixed back in our history as you follow down through the Green Man and the Woodwiss and things? That's one area that some people are looking at, where is it just in our tales and we didn't have a name for them? That's what they were called back then, but they are only ever described as very small. I must point that out. Only like 3 foot or 4 foot tall.
Okay.
I really should introduce you to my folklore book collection here. Unfortunately, it's so far away, Deborah, it's a bit difficult. But I don't know if you know, you probably don't. I've just recently had a book published, which is a collection of witchcraft tales and real magic collected in the Victorian times by the folklorists and the Folklore Society. I've got over 50 such volumes, and the stories about little people, about strange things, fairies, as you described, they're not the Disney fairies, the real fairies, small alien-looking creatures that have been recorded across the country. You will not believe the number of stories. It's one of the things I have problems with certain areas, things like the so-called sort of pigman and dogman faces, because these people have never been described before. But these books don't talk about these kinds of things, but they do talk about definitely something out there. And one of the things I've talked about before is that I think these things have not so much an identity of their own, that they tend to appear in forms that adhere to the current thinking, the current ways we see folklore, mythology, and magic and ideas like that.
Yeah.
So you have things like the Shadow Man. I mean, we know the Shadow Man, he really is made up as a Hollywood thing. Yeah. It was a film that was created, but it's entered the psyche, if you like, entered the mind of people. And people see these things because they expect to see that kind of thing that fits the description. I mean, a classic example, just very briefly, is a particular ghost I know of and have seen myself in a particular location in the UK that was always described until fairly recently as a tall man in a top hat. Definitely a tall, thin man. Mm-hmm. He's now been re-described by people who've been there more recently as being like a Slender Man. Yeah. Now, this guy has been seen long before the Slender Man film ever appeared, before this guy was identified. But people are now seeing that form. And I do think a lot of these things are exactly that. They kind of take on an identity that fits our understanding. That's not to say they're not real, because there's something definitely there. But that's one of the things I found fascinating when I was doing my research, my book, the folklore stories. They're different to what we see or people experience now, but I think it's a mutation of what we are seeing, because it's adhering more to what we're expecting to see, if you know what I mean.
No, I understand entirely. There is that concept to it. Like you said, shucks. It's very rare that a shuck would get reported these days. People don't. They would probably call it a werewolf or a dog man. It's down and
exactly. That's you've hit the nail on the head there.
But yeah, and that's because that's what's out there. It's easy to grasp. But then you've got all of this misinformation put on top. There are lots and lots and lots of talk of attacks and people being killed and attacked and all this going on. That's just for clicks and likes. That's not what's happening out there. People are seeing incredibly strange things, but they always talk about them walking away or running off or making a note, to kind of to distract you. I think that's the problem. People don't. When I get reports of werewolves, I'll say to them, did it have hairs on top of the head? Well, no. Did it have a tail? No. Did it have paw? No, it had hands and feet. So you kind of think, why did they say werewolf then?
Yes, it's exactly that. I mean, that ghost I was talking about is an example of that. Suddenly now it's seen as long, willowy arms. Well, it was never seen like that before. When I saw it, it looked nothing like that. It was a tall, thin man in a long coat and a top hat. And that appearance was at a location that is from the Victorian time. So it fits. His description fits with the time frame of the building itself, so it very much made sense. But when people have seen Slender Man film, that kind of thing, and it's entered into the group psyche, if you like, that this thing's supposed to exist, even though it's absolutely categorically made up for a film back in the 90s, people still think that's what they're seeing. And I do find it fascinating how we get it in day-to-day life. We see something, we think it's something else until we look closer. Oh no, it's not that, it's something else. Because our minds are working that way. They're geared to see things that we can familiarize and recognize to make things safe and comfortable. And sometimes we see things just basically they're not there. Not there as invisible, not there as they're not what we think we're seeing, because it's how our minds work. I mean, it's an old story, but it's a classic example. When Christopher Columbus first arrived in the Caribbean islands, for the locals, it was as if he just appeared out of the blue, out of nowhere, just was there on the beach, because they couldn't see the ships. Yeah. There was an odd blur in the distance, but they had no idea what they were looking at, because he didn't fit or cohere to anything they'd ever seen before. So it was as if Christopher Columbus and co just literally appeared out of the blue, because their minds couldn't grasp something they'd never seen anything like before. Yeah, that's how our minds tend to work. We identify something because it fits in with our understanding of the world and ourselves.
I have to take that into account when I'm taking the witness report. So people would say to me in the beginning, these are just people from the town, and they're out in the woods for the first time and they don't know what's happening. So the break of a twig or a shadow or something. Yeah, I would imagine some of them are that, because I've been in the woods and if you're in there and you're looking for an 8-foot hairy monster, then every twig break makes your heart pound. Every deer running is, for a second, as that pheasant flies out of that grass, oh my goodness.
Yes, I can well imagine.
Yeah, but you instantly then recognise that it is a pheasant or it's a deer. So there is an element of that going on, I would imagine. But then you have people who are out there like rangers and wardens and people. There's been quite a few seen by army people in the Ministry of Defence land, and they are all describing this like 8-foot tall, hairy, covered in hair, human-looking thing. I think there's a spectrum, and it's where you fall within that spectrum. I have to take all of that into account when I'm taking the story from the witness. I think I want to know how much time they've spent out there. You know, if they're a wild camper, I know that they know the outdoors, and when they're telling me that that's what they've seen,
yes,
I know if it was an owl. But I do get accounts where people will hear screeches and howls, and I have to explain to them that sometimes what I'm hearing is deer or fox. You know, you normal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that I feel awful when I'm disappointing people, but I'm quite blunt with the truth. It's better for me to say to you, no, that's a munkjack.
Yes,
Get
absolutely.
rid of that and move on. And if you're not really used to, even if you're from the countryside, you might not be used to being out in the woods at 2 a.m. You're going to hearing things that you've not. And we all know what a dark, creepy wood is like.
Oh, yes.
It's 2 a.m, lights out, your eyes play tricks on you for a start, and you see these little flickering lights, and it takes a long time for your eyes to adjust. And if you stare at something for quite a long time, your brain tries to make it into a face.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the most common things you experience. It's like the old classic orbs, you know, the little balls of light that people get in photographs, which are absolutely caused by dust or water moisture. But the number of times people say, oh, I can see a face in that. And you look, yeah, you can see a face because your mind is designed to work that way. You get 2 dots on a line anywhere and you will see a face. No matter how far apart of that proportion to each other, you will see a face because that's how our brains work.
They're wired that way, aren't they?
Absolutely, definitely.
There was this week, there's a Bigfoot guy out there called Bigfoot Tony, an incredibly honest guy. And you get a lot of misinformation out there. There are a lot of what I call bush shadow monsters, where people have kind of stopped on Google Earth on a bush, or they've stopped on a video that's probably only 1080, and then they zoom right in and they take a crop and then they pixelate it and they go, look, there's a face. The same kind of thing taken with a camera would show you that there is nothing there but shadow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you get 72 followers who go, oh, I can see them. I can see them. When you try to say, look, I'm sorry, but that is clearly a rhododendron bush. And they're quite shady on the inside. And your brain is just kind of putting things together. Paranoia is an absolute pain, I think, for any kind of researcher, paranormal or not, because it happens to the guys out ghost hunting, doesn't it? People will see 17 faces in your picture and draw a red ring round.
Absolutely. You've got 2 problems there, of course. Everyone likes their 5 minutes of fame. If they've got something that looks interesting, stick it on Facebook and it goes on YouTube and people want to talk to them about it. And that's one of the problems as well, because people do like the idea of, I've got this evidence, what do you think? Have a look at this. And I mean, we've all seen it, things like Facebook where someone puts a picture up and they rave about, what do you see, guys? And people say, nothing. I don't see anything. Oh, what are you talking about? Look at my picture again. You can see this is like, you're asking us our opinion, but when we give it to you, it's not the opinion you want. You'll get annoyed.
I'm kind of that way. That's kind of the story of my life. But luckily, not a lot of the things it's wrong. Maybe only 5% of what people are finding out there sparks my interest, because I think now that is strange. And it's those that you keep you at it. You go through all this, but it's only they're learning what to find and what to look for. And over time, you see them put away that stuff, and they're like, right, that's clearly bushcraft. This is clearly a forager. This is nature at play. You have to learn all of those things before you can really start to notice little differences. And even then, you've got to try and debunk it as much as you can, I always say to them, go back and take a comparison shot. If you think that's a face in the bush, get back there as quickly as you can and take a comparison shot. It's the simplest thing to do when you're out. We've done it this weekend. There was a wonderful photograph put up, and did look like there was something in it, and it wasn't spotted by the person. It was spotted by somebody else looking at it. So do the sensible thing. Let's go back and see if there's a stump in that spot. And there wasn't. We couldn't explain away the anomaly, but it is still an anomaly because we didn't see it with our own eyes.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of, you're breaking people's hearts sometimes, when you say.
Unfortunately, yes. And sometimes you get a bit of grief because you're doing that. It's like,
you can't. It's really bad sometimes, but I can't say to if I know that that's a bivvy that the army's done or it's a bushcraft shelter, I have to be honest and say that is the bushcraft. You know, there's not really much I can do about it. But there are very strange things that we find out there that we cannot explain. And I've asked the wild campers and I've asked the bushcrafters, and they're saying, no, that's not us. We're not leaving those things behind. So it's though I wait and see if you mention them, and I think, right, we're in good ground. It might be worth me, you know, having a look there or getting somebody there to have a look and see what food source is in the area. Oh, I mean, that's only counting your odds that these cryptids that I'm talking about are flesh and blood. If they are of a spiritual, dimensional nature, it wouldn't matter what was in the area. They could go where they want, when they wanted. So it depends on where you fall on the theory.
Yes, I mean, that's often what strikes me with a lot of these sorts of sightings. They do tend to be the wilder, more remote places. Now, we don't have very many wild, remote places in the UK, but of course America has lots of wild, remote places. Well, there's some wild places in the middle of the cities, but that's another story. But that's often the thing I find interesting. These things don't tend to show up in massive areas where there's lots of population. You know, I find that interesting. Now, whether it's because they are physical creatures who would obviously keep away from those kind of areas because it's dangerous, and that opens up that door. But if they are sort of more of a sort of non-material creature, again, I find it interesting. You don't tend to get those sightings in built-up areas. Now, that doesn't mean they're necessarily not real. I think there's something about even both kinds of explanations for these kind of things, that these things generally seem to keep away from busy areas, whether it's because day-to-day life is frantic and even living in crowded areas and people have got day-to-day life and it's keeping them busy and they don't notice these things. I think that tends to be probably more what's happening is people don't notice them because their lives are so busy, so involved, and they worry about the neighbours and all that kind of stuff and the local kids and all that. They would dismiss something that might seem a little bit odd because they're too busy worrying about other things. But if you're in a more remote rural area, you tend to notice unusual things more often than if you're living in a real big city area. So that's one thing I find fascinating, that if you're very close attentive to these kind of things. Now, when I was young, I used to walk around my hometown at night a lot. I used to find it quite fascinating. And I had a couple of strange encounters that were very physical, real people, but they were acting very, very strangely. And I won't necessarily go into details now, that you think, well, this is a busy town that's under 1,000 plus people, a few miles from London, and yet there are weird characters who are doing strange stuff. Now, I don't mean human strange, I mean really acting weird as if they aren't just ordinary people. And I used to kind of find that really quite scary, but fascinating at the same time. So that always made me wonder why these things tend to be more remote areas. But I think they're saying if they are flesh and blood, they need the right food, they need the right environment to exist, certainly.
I've got to be honest, I don't think it is only in the very out there areas. There's sightings in Chatham. There's sightings in not too far from the Humber in the northeast. People are seeing them quite close to towns. But like you say, A, they've got to know that they're seeing something strange. And B, they've got to be out at that time of night, haven't they? I think they are like us, and that they will utilise whatever they can, whenever they can. That's just my personal opinion. Because I was in a town when I saw it, and I was next to a food garden, and I wonder if that was the draw. But if it was a spiritual kind of dimensional thing that I saw, then it makes sense that it would be there. It doesn't make sense for a flesh and blood creature to be seen where I was. That is absolutely impossible. But 5 other people seen him too. So that's the draw for me. I am still trying to work out what he was, how he got there. You know, the frequently asked questions. And I might never know, and I'm okay with that now. I think I wasn't at the beginning. I thought he was a monster.
It is that kind of thing that drives us, isn't it? When you have those early experiences, you just can't explain. They're anomalous, they're strange. I won't sit here and tell yet again my story of my very first ghost sighting when I was about 10 years old. And it's one of those things that when I think about it now, I mean, I'm 50 this year, so it was 40 years ago. I can still see it like it was yesterday. It was just, what on earth are they doing there? You know, that kind of thing. It just stays with you, doesn't it?
It just does, and there's nothing. You don't ask for it to happen either, do you? Nobody asks for permission. It just happens to.
Well, exactly. It's kind of what we were just talking about, because my actual sighting I had was a sunny summer afternoon on a Sunday in a local World War II fort that was closed down, but you could get into it very easily. It wasn't the middle of the night. It wasn't dark and spooky. It wasn't Halloween. It was Sunday afternoon in the summer. Totally the opposite of your usual ghostly experience, and yet that's when it happened.
Exactly. It was the same for me. Sunny afternoon, middle of the week, in a local park.
Yeah.
Utterly ridiculous. It should not have happened. But I have questioned myself over and over and over. And then I thought the only thing I can do is try and find other people. I suppose, like, if you see a UFO or you're abducted, or like you see spirit, finding other people that have gone through something similar, it's kind of validation, isn't it? It helps. You think, oh, thank God for that. I'm not going crazy.
Well, I mean, for years I thought I was crazy because I didn't know anybody else who'd ever had that kind of experience. The only access I had was a local library of ghost books and sort of books on magic and that kind of stuff. That was it. There was nothing. There was nobody else I knew.
The joy of it sounds awful me saying the joy of you saying that, but I went to the local library exactly the same. I'm 15. I'm thinking either my parents have lied to me and they know about these things, or even worse, they have no idea what's out there.
And most of the time it is absolutely the latter. People don't know. It's one of those things. I used to work with a couple of different paranormal events companies over the years, and often people would come along, and perhaps a spouse, husband, wife, whatever, would come who've done the driving. They're not a believer or anything. But the number of times you get people come to you and say, I don't really believe in this kind of stuff, but there was this one time when I had, and then I'll tell you a ghost story. And you think, you just told me you don't believe, but you just told me a story of your experience.
Always happens like that. Or my Uncle Frank, or back once when I was with my dad. It happens to me all the time. People ask me what I'm doing in an area, or ask me when I'm doing a talk. And at the beginning, I can see at the beginning, they have no interest whatsoever in what I'm talking about. And then I start to talk about things. And at the end, there was always somebody who says, well, actually, when I was younger, or actually I've had to rethink something that happened to me years ago. Or I was with my girlfriend and we were out, and people start to remember things from childhood, and it's just that's really, really strange. For me, I was lucky because other people said, well, I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that in that same place. Yeah, I've seen that. But not everybody's that lucky, are they?
I think one of the things is I think these sort of experiences are far more common than we actually recognise, because people don't talk about it. It often was the occasion when people had brought their husband, wife, whatever, friends to the paranormal event, and they're there because they've sort of been dragged into it. But they do have experiences, and people will dismiss it. And they say, well, this is what happened, but I don't really believe in ghosts. But what you've just explained to me, how else do you explain what you experienced? I don't know. It was just weird, man. It was just strange.
Lots of people have that. There's a gentleman up in the northeast who was out walking his dog about 8:30, sunny night, walking down a farm lane. Dog starts going mad, so he looks up expecting to see a box and sees this massive 8-foot hair-covered creature, as he described it, that had the same shape as the American Sasquatch. But he didn't know that at the time because he'd not. Obviously, after that, he went online and he tried to find, and he was like, whoa, that's what it looked like. But long story short, he looks at it and he says, he tips his hat and says, "Alright," nodded and walked back up the lane. And he said he didn't get scared till he got home. Why he let onto it, he has got no idea whatsoever. But to me, it makes perfect sense, because 9 times out of 10, you just don't know how to react.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
You don't know what to do when encountered with something that is absolutely impossible. People tend to ask me some ridiculous questions, and I say, he didn't give me a pamphlet. He didn't give me a free. Now you've had your sighting, here is a frequently asked question, just in case you have any, questions when you get home. That didn't happen, unfortunately. I pushed my friend to the floor. I was so frightened, and I ran like the wind to get home. And even admitted to my parents that I'd played truant. And back, I'm 51, so you can imagine back then to tell your parents that you had not been in school. Was my mum thought I'd gone too lower.
See, I feel very jealous here because you guys have both seen things, and I still haven't seen nothing.
The fortunate unfortunates, I call us.
So what makes you so interested, Mark, if you're actually not experienced anything yourself?
I guess I'm not in the right place at the right time. You know, a lot of the paranormal investigations I've done, I've never seen anything. I felt things, I've heard things, but I've never seen anything. Certainly never seen Bigfoot or any types of. I did see a black cat though, Black Panther when I was young. I've told this story before where we were. Oh God, I think I was about 10 years old. In my family, we went camping in Death Valley, California. And we were hiking through this canyon, and we looked up on the canyon wall, and about 60, 70 feet above us on the canyon wall on this perch, there were 2 large black panthers. Now, you know, we're not supposed to have black panthers here in the United States. And these cats were huge, and they were definitely mountain lion type size animals, but then, yeah, that's about the only thing I've really seen when it comes to cryptid type creatures.
But you said you'd felt things. That's an experience. That feeling of being watched or shadowed or knowing that something's watching you from the trees. Or other people report a kind of infrasound, feeling sick and needing to leave the area, you know, that kind of thing. That all counts as an experience because your body's picking up on something.
Yes.
You know, it might be your animal brain that you would have used as a caveman, but something is telling you to be aware that your body's picked up on something. I just call it my animal brain, to be honest, when I'm out. And normally people who have that kind of experience tend to be witnesses, so you might just be a future witness. It not have happened yet.
Well, God, it ain't for a lack of trying. I'll tell you that right now. I've been searching for these things.
The paleo-mammalian part of the brain, or the reptile brain, is the bit that is responsible for instinctual reaction to things, and that often is the part that senses something that's not quite right. But we don't. Yeah. But then, unfortunately, we try to intellectualize it and think, "Oh, no, everything's fine," and people ignore and suspend it. But that part of our brain is one of the most powerful. It's the oldest part, the most powerful, the instinctual driver. So you do sometimes get that reaction of this ain't not right, but you don't know why. You're feeling it. You're aware something's odd, and sometimes nothing actually happens, but you have a sense of something's not quite right. So I've never asked you this before, Mark. How did you get involved and interested in the first place if you've never had an experience like that?
Well, you know, I've had experience. Like I said, I've had experiences, just never have seen anything with the naked eye. But as a child, when I was in elementary school, I was always fascinated with ghosts. I started reading books at the library about ghosts. You know, they'd have the famous pictures of, like, say, the Brown Lady and other pictures. And this was back in the 1970s. And I was always interested in it. And even in high school, I was about 17, and we saw this documentary that was shown on local television called The Amazing World of Psychic Phenomenon. And in this documentary, this one guy was going around with a big reel-to-reel tape recorder to graveyards and tape recording graves. Now, this was back before the term EVP was even coined. So he would tape record graves, and every few graves, he would get voice responses. So being the idiots that we were, we got, hey, this is a great idea, let's do it. So we grab a cassette tape recorder, run to the nearest cemetery, in broad daylight, I have to add, and proceed to start recording graves. And wouldn't you know it, we actually got responses.
Getting a bit of feedback there.
Yeah. It'll be all right. The responses, the first response was both of them were the same woman's voice. In the first one, there was this whisper, and she says, "I'm dead, help me."
Oh.
Very creepy. The one friend who was with us wanted to, like, get the hell out of there right then and there, but my brother and I were going, no, we need to get some more. So we tried it again, and when we played it back the second time, there was the same woman's voice, much louder, as clear as we're talking now, but there was a slight echo, like she was talking in an enclosed room. And the voice says, "It isn't finished." So, not knowing any better at that point in time, we let it go, and I didn't really pursue it until I moved here to New Jersey back in the end of 99, and I moved into a house that I lived in for about 3-4 years that actually had activity. And I started hearing my name being called at night. I would feel certain things. I started experiencing sleep paralysis. I started filming with a video camera, and I actually caught a bunch of anomalies that were not dust on camera. And I called in a local group to help me investigate it, and I joined them on the investigation, got hooked, and I've been doing it ever since.
Ah. Funny enough, my very first ever audio recording was also in a graveyard. It was back in the days when EVP were known about as, and it was given that term. It was still the early days, about 2000, 2001. And where I used to investigate with friends down in the south coast of the UK, a place called Sussex, there's a very large, a very old cemetery called Durrington Cemetery. I mean, it's absolutely massive. So there's no actual church there. It's just a small chapel for burial, and then there's an enormous graveyard. And we placed my audio recorder, a little dictaphone, on a tree nearby and wandered off and left it there for about half an hour and came back. And within about 5 minutes of the recording, there was a man's voice, clear as anything, saying, and it didn't make any sense, and it still doesn't, but he said, "What would you like, bloody thing?" And that was it. But it was as clear as that. A man's voice very clearly said, "What would you like, bloody thing?" It's just very strange. I've still got the recording.
Do you know, we used to go over the graveyards when we were kids as well, but we used to go over at midnight and sit there. Didn't think to take a recorder over with us.
No.
Yeah, a couple of times. There was a graveyard at the back of my school as well. We went over there with spades once.
With spades?
With spades?
Yeah.
Grave robber?
We were treasure hunting.
What were your friends called? Burke and Hare?
We never dug anything up.
Can you imagine that? The little old lady.
No, we didn't.
Found in a graveyard with a shovel. Looks pretty suspicious.
No, we didn't. We didn't dig anything up because right next to the graveyard was this garden with this apple tree. So we went scrumping instead.
Can you imagine being a little old lady, though, in the semi-detached, peeping through the net curtains, watching the birds go down to the graveyard?
You're talking about that, right? In Glasgow, my grandfather used to tell us stories when we were kids. And he told us about this old church that had been closed down because it was due for being demolished. It had been over 100 years since the last burial and everything. So it was closed down. It had a high wall round it, but it had wrought iron gates. And one night, there was a crowd of people crowded around these wrought iron gates and one thing or another, because inside there was like phantoms running around in and out between the graves. Really what they were people with sheets on or something over the top of them. And while they were doing that, the pickpockets were going through all the people's pockets. That was Glasgow.
Sounds about right. I'm afraid I've been there. It's a nice place, but it has its rough areas, like most towns, really. But I mean, as you guys both know, back in the sort of very late 90s, I was involved in investigating some very strange activity that was going on down the southeast, particularly that was involving more ritual magic and the like sites being investigated, desecrated.
Yeah, near where I used to live, where I was born, Chanctonbury, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Chanctonbury Ring.
And my birth certificate says that I'm born in the district of Chanctonbury. Yeah.
Now, that's got some interesting stories behind that one, Deborah, if you've heard about Chanctonbury Ring and Clapham Wood. It's got very strange.
Oh, and there's accounts of Clapham Wood. I have an account of Clapham Wood. You know what? One of the things I said before when I said I noticed patterns, one of the patterns I've noticed, and it's what I did was I thought, right, I need to look at this scientifically. It could just be me putting things together that I want to go together. So I thought I'll check the first 20 sightings on the map, and every single one of them was at either a standing stone, a hill fort, a barrow, or a stone circle.
Yeah?
Yeah. So I thought, right, well, that could just be me. It's not that hard to put areas in the UK together with megaliths, is it really? So I thought, right, I'll randomly pick 20. So I randomly picked 20 out of the 400 and odd that there are, and every single one of those is the same. There is a standing stone, like, is it Amesbury Banks in Epping? I always get it wrong, Amesbury Banks, something like that.
Oh, yes.
There. any areas like that with an old hill fort or Salisbury Plain and Bankery in Scotland where the standing stones are, these sightings act like within a walk, within like 50 paces of them. There's some at Stonehenge.
Well, it absolutely makes sense if you think about it, because it suggests that the places, that the areas themselves were known to be strange. Therefore, things like burials, standing stones were placed to mark these sites of interest and intrigue. That makes perfect sense. There would be a correlation between the two. Or you've got the other way around. Because these are ancient sites with stone monuments, people were drawn to them and have carried out rituals, etc., and use the energy of the land because they already have the stone. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg one, really, isn't it? You're either way around. Yeah, the correlation's going to be absolute.
Yeah, it's a matter of now. I am so used to it now. When I take an account and I put it onto the map, I put a photograph of whatever the thing in that area is, whether it be a sacred stone, an ancient well, a standing stone, a barrow, a hill fort. I put that photograph on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that the correlation is unbelievable, and I just think, that's. Like you say, is it the energy or is it the fact that it's always been there and we were attracted to those areas too?
Exactly. Well, the
Canterbury
ring is slightly different, though. Well, Canterbury ring's slightly different because, of course, there's no ring as such other than the ring of trees, which were Victorian. But nevertheless, it's had all sorts of reports over, again, from my books that I've got here. It's been a site that's been noted for strange activity for many, many years, long before the Victorian times. But there's no historic standing stones in Canterbury ring. So the ring is made from trees, but the area definitely has got strange anomalies to it. And there's no doubt about that at all.
Is there a Roman road or an ancient spring?
Oh, there's loads of Roman roads up round there over the South Downs and everything.
That's also something.
From my village, you could see Canterbury Ring, right? And my father used to say to us when we were kids, walk round it 3 times. You see that at midnight you'll see the devil. That was what was said. Well,
the problem with that would be is you walk around the whole hill, it'll take you all night, so you'll never get it done. This is miles and miles. I'll tell you a little quick story though about a personal experience with Canterbury Hill itself, Canterbury Ring. I was involved in an investigation to do with ritual type activity. Now I'm interested in magic, you guys know that, but it's not a problem. But there was definitely groups operating in the southeast who would use the energy of a local site and change it and make it unpleasant and negative and cause basically not very nice things to happen there. And on this particular occasion, for reasons that will take a long time to explain, we were drawn, there's 5 of us in the group, to Canterbury Ring. Now, we parked in the small car park, which Irene knows the area. There's a road that leads to the base of the hill, and there's a car park there that goes nowhere else. You can't go anywhere else from the car park. And if you take a certain route up in the winter, which we took, you can see the car park as you're going up the hill quite easily. And about halfway, third of the way up, we noticed 2 cars come into the car park. We thought, oh, hello, hope they can leave our car alone. They were there for maybe 5-10 minutes, and then they drove off. And thought, okay, fair enough, we'll leave them to it. We got to the top of the hill, and there's a particular part there that there are photographs of a ritual site that was a ritual activity that took place back in the 1970s on Canterbury Ring Hill itself. There's photographs of it. It's in the book that I've got here. And occasionally you do find other stuff in the approximate area. Now, close to that area, there was a tree stump that was hollowed out. The stump itself was maybe about 4 or 5 feet tall, and it was a very old tree, been cut down years ago. I mean, hollowed into like a bowl effect, and often fires had been set inside this bowl of the tree. Yeah. And as we looked, there were 4 carvings side by side. They're like what we call bind runes. Now, a lot about runes, Viking runes, and what we call 4 bind runes. And we made a note, drew them because carried with us what we'd seen there. There was nothing else to the site. We thought, this is okay. We've not found much here. So we walked back down the hill. You can see it takes quite a while down. We get back to the car. Now, it'd been quite muddy that night, and there was mud on the windscreen. And we noticed that somebody had drawn the same 4 bind runes on our windscreen that we found in the tree up there. So whoever those people in the car were, they were definitely up to something, and we disturbed them. And they kind of left us like a warning message by putting the same markings on the windscreen of the car. It's like, oh, okay. That's a bit disturbing. So
the bind runes, what did they actually mean?
Unfortunately,
what was the meaning of them?
At that
point, I was going to ask that.
At that point, they were unusual. Now, I know runes quite well, and they didn't adhere to any particular version that I could make sense of. Now, that doesn't mean to say they were necessarily wrong. I do wonder if they were perhaps they'd mixed different, because you have what called runic futharks, different kinds of orders of runes, and they may have mixed more than one up because they didn't make sense to me. From what I remember, unfortunately, I don't have we didn't photograph it, only drew them. And the driver of the car removed them from his windscreen quite quickly. He was a bit freaked by the whole idea of it. So unfortunately, that piece of paper, I mean, we're talking about the 90s here, that's long gone. So I don't know what on earth was on there. But it turned out years later, I found out that Andy Collins, who's someone I've got to know, okay.
Yeah, we've interviewed him, I believe.
Yeah, he was investigating all this kind of activity back in the 90s as well. And he was on a group that were actually doing a lot of stuff over in the West Country, but they were using runes as well. But again, I've seen the photographs of the stuff they were using, and it doesn't make sense. I know runes, and these images don't quite adhere to a conventional runic futhark, so they were obviously working their own kind of variation. And if you remember the conversation we had some time ago,
you've written on the runes, haven't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. There are. Say that again.
There's an old ancient language called the Vinca language, and it's the first written language in Europe. Yeah. And I only know about it because some of the glyphs that we find out in the woods look very runic, and some of them do match the runes, but lots of them match this strange Vinca language that nobody's ever been able to translate. And I'm sure if you had a look that you might see some similarities.
That's exactly what I was going to say to you. If you can perhaps send me the images, I'll have a look for it. Because I just said I've actually written a book on runes that's been published a couple of years back. Yeah, but one of the things I was going to point out that I think is relevant to this as well is we tend to talk about 4 modern futharks, which is the name given to runic orders, as being the ones that exist. Just very briefly, they're called the Elder Futhark, the Younger Futhark, the Anglo-Saxon Futhark, and the Armadan Futhark. And as I said before, these are modern constructs because there are dozens and dozens of different variations around that are similar, and some are quite different. I mean, I've just picked up a book on the Icelandic runes, and it's something that's been written about for the first time exclusively on those, and they're quite different again. Now, I also know things called Icelandic staves, which are stave magic. Now, what I suspect that what I was actually on that stump were staves rather than runes. And I don't want to go into the whole history of that; it's a bit more complicated. But they are very powerfully magically charged symbols, and I use those myself. But certainly, if you've got pictures or photographs of those, Deborah, please do send them over to me, and I'll have a look and give you an idea what they are.
I will. It's a very it's when you look at them, I've been looking for years at what these strange things that people are finding out in the woods mean, and a lot of them, 99% of them are weather, but these can consistently place signs that are kept of databases them from all across the UK. So I'm forever looking at symbols like gypsy patrons or the old Ogham. Anything Pictish language, anything that I can find that may give me an answer. And when I saw the Vinca language, I thought, I know that one and that one. You know, when you just see, you like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, I've got to know what the meanings are. And it's quite, there's an academic lady done an awful lot of work into it, but she hasn't been able to decode it. But I'll send you everything I've got.
A lot of examples of what they call proto-runes. Now, the runes themselves kind of appear almost out of the blue at one point in history, but obviously they've been around for thousands of years before. And a lot of the symbols that you see, you can see what they call the proto-runes, which are runic-like markings that are similar, but they tend to evolve into something else. Absolutely, have a look at them, definitely.
Yeah, I think you would have a regional runes. It would be a difference, like we have a different...
Oh, God, yeah, absolutely.
It would be a regional thing, and that's kind of what I'm seeing in the signs that I'm finding out there. There's these strange, looks like, I pronounce it Manaz, like an M with the 2 lines. I probably say.
Oh, yeah, Manaz, yeah.
We find that quite often, which is, but only in certain areas. Exactly. So we're thinking, we're not saying that Bigfoot leave them, we're saying this is strange and the bushcrafters don't leave it and the wild campers don't leave it. Is it geocaches? Is it people practicing Wicca? Is it something we don't understand? So even a negative of, I know what that is, it's us that leaves them, to me saves me a lot of time. I don't have to worry about doing that anymore. But they're finding some very strange symbols out there, and somebody's leaving them, and a lot of them match the runes. It's quite strange.
Deborah, are these symbols also being found in the States and Canada and places?
Yes. And Russia. I can match. Yeah, I can match the ones from the UK with Igers in Russia, Iger Burtsevs. We send each other the A sign constantly back and forth. And yes, they find them in America and in Canada. I'm trying to think. And Europe. We found them in Europe. Not all of the woods in Europe, but quite a few areas that, as you know, I map routes.
Well, what are they, carved into the tree trunks or onto stones or what?
You see them made on the ground with sticks, and people will find them and photograph them and mess with them. And when they go back, they've been put back to the way that they should be. And we don't know if they're a sign, an indicator of something, a message, or is there somebody out there, human, that's doing this, and what is the reason behind it?
Well, he's got. I tell you what, if there's someone out there human, he's got a hell of a lot of distance to travel.
Yeah, exactly. And you know the X's that you hear of in America, the large X's and the TP structures, we also find them as well. And there's an incredibly clever lady called Alison Wilkinson, and she GPS'd the large X's in her wood, and then an aerial photograph and actually put the GPS coordinates on in red dots, and they formed a square, like a boundary.
Oh,
almost like a living room. And outside of that were these arches that we find. And I know trees make arches, but they're intricately pinned. They're normally pinned by a huge log or something like that. But we can't, you know, these weather can do that, so we have to be incredibly careful about what we say about them. But there seems to be some very strange ones around, and these were outside of the square perimeter.
Do you know, we've interviewed plenty of people that talked about Bigfoot and one thing or another, but never about these details that you're talking about now.
It's because when I saw it, I had no idea of Bigfoot. I wasn't into Bigfoot or nothing. So then 20 years on, when I want some answers, I get asked, when I saw the Sykesville monster, that so much like what I saw. I went looking. I thought, is it Heidelbergensis? Is it Heidel? You know, down the hominid line, trying to find the hominid line. Yeah. And then I just kind of stumbled on the structures in that, Irene, by accident, really. I looked at what the Americans were doing, and I thought, well, if I'm trying to say that I've got a similar kind of creature, I need to be out looking for these things. And then I started finding them. And one of the hardest things is getting people to, go out and look because they think I'm absolutely crackers. But sometimes they will come back and say, actually, I'm finding really strange things out in the woods as well. So I say, well, just take photographs of them and send them in, and we'll put them in the database. And eventually you start to notice that people are finding these similar glyphs. I'll send some over to you later. Like pinwheels, almost of always different kinds of sticks in a kind of pinwheel or medicine wheel shape. That are left. And they can be the size of a dinner plate or as big as a cathedral.
Wow.
You know? There's just strange anomalies like that we take a note of them. And like you say, it could be human, it could be weather, it could be a whole host of...
I doubt if it's weather.
But I say, take a photograph of them anyway, and just go back and check on them every now and again and see if they've changed.
That's strange. Carry on, Andy. Oh, sorry, Mark.
Well, go ahead.
No,
I was finished.
I was handing it over to Andy.
Well, I just wanted to ask a quick question about these glyphs. Now, you said there are photographs taken of them, and where can they be found?
Well, I have them all in my group. I have a group on Facebook, and there's lots and lots of researchers in that group, so they're out all across the UK. And they go back to about 2012, I think, in the database. And we've been able to eliminate a lot of them. In the early days, what came in, what we thought were these fantastical finds, turned out to be bushcraft shelters. So we were able to get rid of those and just concentrate down onto these very strange, I would say there's about 7 or 8 of them. And one of the strangest one of them is, and when I tell you, you'll say, oh, she's absolutely bonkers. But I will guarantee you'll find it when you go out. Along the ley lines, we find sticks that are about 4 foot high, and they're always dark wood, and they have a snapped end, which is very white, and you can see it in dark and dusk, and they're rammed into the ground where the lays are. And some of them will have a directional kind of another twig going off in a direction, and you follow that twig and you find the next one. It sounds ridiculous, I know. So I looked at early tribes and what they left behind. And some of the tribes in the UK and in the Amazon tribes will leave a ground stick in the ground, giving a direction of where they're going. So the next tribe member coming along will follow that. There is a gentleman not too far from you, Andy, who has found 20 of these in a line. And when he got to the end of this line, after traversing about 5 miles across the wood, there was a massive 9-foot round stick rammed into the ground on the leg. And we have doused them. Somebody went out actually yesterday and doused one down in the south. And on each, I don't understand a lot about ley lines, but apparently there are kind of nodules or nodes of energy within them. These sticks are rammed in those points. So who's doing that? Who is tapping into the Earth's energy?
There's plenty of books out there that mark them down as to where you could find them. Again, it could be that finding them themselves. Roughly whereabouts we're talking?
All over. They find them all across the UK.
You say one, but close to
down where you are. I'm not really sure where her area is. I would have to ask her. I know that many researchers, unfortunately, that everybody merges, if you can understand.
Yeah, sure. Lose track of who's who.
I think the gentleman who's found the most, he's found 90. I think there's 90 in his album. He's in, if I'm correct, he's in Oxfordshire. And it's around, not too far from that Lee Valley.
Oh,
yes. Yeah, there, around that area. But people, once we've started finding them, we were saying to people, are you leaving these? Is it foragers that are leaving them? No. Is it the bushcrafters? No. We can't find any human thought. And they just look ridiculous. You think it's just a stick. It's nothing. But when I send them over to you later, I wish I'd have known the subject was going to come up, because I would have had some images ready for you and I would have been able to share them.
Well, don't worry, we're on radio, so people can't see them, can they?
Oh,
so
right. Well, if anybody wants to know, that I actually have a YouTube channel, and on the YouTube channel, I've put them in the playlist. I've actually put all of the A signs together, all of these stick finds that we find, so that people can just have a quick scan of them and then look for them when they're out. And you won't always find them. They're not everywhere. And we also had a gentleman come over from Italy who works, he's a forestry worker. So the idea being he should be able to look at them and say to us, oh, I know what that is. And I'm finding them too. And he said, I have no idea what they are. And no, we don't find them in the woods in Italy. So it's just an anomaly that's out there at the minute. So everybody's kind of finding them. You've got people in Canada going, well, hang on a minute. I'm finding them as well. But I just kind of put it down to, so it seems these sticks, we just call them ground sticks. These exactly like that. As you know what a grounding stick is, don't you, Andy? People use a grounding stick to ground themselves. Yes, it's as if they're doing that, as if somebody is doing that. But these sticks are in a line and they tend to lead to other structure-like things.
Markers, effectively, aren't they?
And they're normally on ley lines.
Normally, yes. Yeah, this is just something we've only thought about recently. So a lady said, I didn't even know she was going to do it. And she said, I actually tested that theory out. And you can see the rods, you know, as they cross kind of thing. But that's her private research, so I don't really want to go too much into it. But if you're an energy worker and you have any interest in this subject, have a look around your area. If you know where the ley lines are in your area, just have a look.
My garden.
Well, have a look how you finding sticks rammed into the ground. They're not massive things, Irene. They're only like...
Well, here's a question that I've always wondered. How in the hell do you track ley lines? How do you know where ley lines intersect? It's not like you have a map that you can look at.
You can douse them.
Actually, yeah, you can have maps you can look at, because one of the arguments about these things is they are ancient trackways, that they've become, against chicken and egg thing, they've become energized because people use them for thousands of years, or people from thousands of years ago have found them and walked them because they feel it, because they sense it far more than we do today.
You sense it coming up through your feet.
That's why I asked about Roman roads.
Yeah.
A lot of Roman roads are built on our ley line system because we walk them. They're very good foraging routes, and they normally, your best ones are between coast and field. Kind of these foraging routes that we would use as early man.
And Roman roads go all over this country.
Yeah, you can douse them. You can use your pendulum on them. Some people are incredibly lucky and they can pick up on them themselves. And you tend to find a lot of old churches and things like that are built on them, aren't they, Andy, if I'm correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, often those churches, of course, are built on older sites anyway, so it's the Christianization of pagan sites. So, I mean, the evidence of that, that's very much the case, certainly. But, I mean, the best person for this is, of course, Albert Watkins, the old straight track, which is the first person to really detail these existing lines of energy across the UK. I mean, that's probably your best source for actual mapping of these things in the UK, Mark, obviously.
I have overlaid them. I've overlaid the sightings on to the ley line map that is out there at the moment, and there is a correlation.
Oh,
Deborah,
speaking things like ghost sightings and other sort of paranormal activity tend to group around, as you said before, ancient sites and so ley line lines. I mean,
they follow ley lines.
Yeah, sorry,
they follow ley lines straight through my bloody house. Well, I was going to say, Deborah, before you carry on, these pictures of the sticks that you've got, if you send them to Andy can put them out on the Paranormal UK radio fan page.
Yeah, I can do that. That's really.
If you would do that, Andy, for us.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, I can do that tomorrow, boy. That's not a problem. It's just they might mean nothing at the end of the day. But if we're finding them worldwide and we're asking each other and saying, the best thing that I ever did was networking. I never was never scared of messaging somebody and saying, what are you finding in your area? And a lot of the time I get the eye roll. I'm a Bigfoot researcher from the UK, but I've been at this 35 years. So I've met an awful lot of people who are all across the world who are watching habituations, and pass this information around each other. And like I say, we might be wrong at the end of the day, but you've got to follow every clue that you can find, haven't you, and see where it leads.
Yeah, but I just hope it doesn't get to the point where, like the crop circles, you get these fakers going sticking sticks in everywhere.
Beyond that, we do get fakers. We get fakers, and I'm very good at outing them. They call me the bully on YouTube. Because if I catch somebody faking in the UK, I make sure
you kick ass, don't you? You kick ass.
Yes, I won't have it, mate. It's just not on. Because I know the other guys that are out there, week in, week out, really putting the hours in. You don't find everything. People put these daily videos up of finds. It doesn't happen like that. I found one print in the entire time I've been at this. One that I suspected maybe, just maybe, may not be human. But I never put it out there. I didn't put it on YouTube because I can't prove that it's not a human foot. But there are other people who find them every day, around every corner. They have a sighting every single day, and it's just for clicks and likes, and it's ridiculous. They're out there in winter. Some of them are out there 6 and 7 weeks in wild campers, and it's them that are reporting the strange findings and a bit of America, I think. Yeah.
What I was going to also ask was with Bigfoot or the wild man or whatever we call him over here, Willowoos or whatever. Does he migrate?
I'm unsure. There is a period of quiet. I can answer that for certain.
Yeah, because whatever goes on out the back here in my house does get quiet at a certain time.
It's normally between about. Yeah, I don't think they use. As we discussed before with Andy, the UK is quite a small area. Less than 10% of it is urban, though, and that includes roads. But I don't think they're in any place for too long. I think they consistently move.
Yeah, I think they come here once a year.
That's what I was going to say. It might be a resource in the area. It might be just it's on the foraging route. There might be another reason why that area is important. But I say to people, go back. Just because you go in January and there's nothing there doesn't mean you're not going to hit the jackpot in August. It might just be a season.
Well, it's around about September.
Yeah, and then what you will find is around
late summer it is.
So it's like your good foraging times. It's almost at harvest, and then just 2 or 3 weeks after harvest, around about second week of October, middle of November, it starts to go quiet, and we don't see any signs in the woods, and the woods shut down.
I'll tell you, these woods around here are full of cobnuts.
Yeah, that's the thing that I asked, and lots of people on the radio show the other week what a cobnut was, and nobody could answer. Didn't know what a filbert was either.
I love cobnuts.
People say to me all the time, there's not enough food. You have no idea of the food sources that are out there. They're they're immense. If you know what to look for, and I would imagine, like bears, they have a mental map of every food and resource and medicine that's out there in nature. It might be that willow is in your area at a certain time of year, and willow is an immense painkiller, as we know. Maybe it's something as simple as that, or they might be something sacred about your area.
I'll tell you what I've got at the bottom of my garden. Has there ever been any connection of elderberry with them?
Elderberry's just full of vitamin C, isn't it? I'd be eating it.
I got an elderberry tree.
I would imagine it's the river. Have you got a stream at the back or a river?
Well, Glenant's house, the name Glenant, which is the name of this house, is housed by the stream.
Well, that's why. It's the stream that will follow the I honestly believe that river...
the stream is just about
little highway.
Away.
And you will have food in your garden and other ones of your neighbours, and it might be they're on the way to somewhere. Do you get what I mean? So you're on a corridor, as I would call it. Even in America, Russia, wherever you go, there are these foraging routes, it seems to be, these corridors, like the Appalachian Trail, where the sightings, when you clock the times and the year, there is a seasonal pattern to the sightings, and it seems to be in the rainiest times of the year that you get the more sightings. I really don't know. Maybe it's because the deer are moving through at those times of year. I think it might have something to do with that. The elk, the moose, it's that kind of foraging, eating pattern. But if it's sacred, it might be that I had to ask somebody, is there an old religious ceremony around about harvest time to now? And they said, yes, Samhain and Beltane. And kind of between those two times, it goes quiet.
Well, Beltane's about now, of course, but Samhain is the autumn.
And this is when it wakes up. The last 2 weeks we've had, but all right, I've got sign again. As that wild garlic flowers and food starts to rush through in the woods and sap is running, instantly we start getting right. I've got sign again in the woods. I've got movement. Something's happening in the woods. Massive trees have been pushed over, or the chickens have gone again. There is a definite seasonal pattern. Yeah, because obviously you have to watch habituations. It's not just one-off sightings. There are people in the UK that have lived on family properties for a very, very, very long time that are so used to seeing these things they don't even question it. In Scotland,
it was always the autumn that things used to start happening for us as well. When it turns activity around us, it was always autumn. It began, so it was that part of that dying of the year, if you like.
Yeah, exactly, and getting through the winter month, and then the rejoicing of spring coming in, and new food, and everything's mating and everything's giving birth, and I just think it might be something to do with that. Do they hibernate? Not hibernate as in go to sleep, but do they use the cave systems? Do they go up to the Cairngorms? What do they do? Where do they go in these months when people aren't reporting them? Or is it because we aren't out as much at that time of year? It could just be that. We're not wild camping in November, December, January. I'm just not sure, but that is a pattern that I've noticed. There's a lot of patterns, I'm afraid, but they don't lead you to any answers.
Let's come back to that question a bit. Are they fully just animal creatures, or is there more going on? Maybe they do literally go somewhere else in those times of the year. Maybe that's possible.
But there's that spectrum, isn't there, from just an ape-like creature all the way through to some sentient being. There's all of those theories that hit the spectrum in between. So for me, I've just had to answer as many of the general questions as I can. And then now, when somebody reports to me, I say, well, these are the theories, and I give them the options, and then they can go and decide for themselves what they think it was that they saw. I think sometimes that's just the best thing to do, and they can decide for themselves, really, then and they're more comfortable with it, I think. I mean, you must have been, I can't remember words out. I've just gone right back. I'm back now in Beulah and my heart is pounding. You must have interviewed a lot of people in your time. Do you find that once they've spoken about what they've experienced, that things start to get better for them? They kind of overcome the fear?
Yeah, I've obviously these guys have been doing this show for a number of years as well, and I used to be involved in the show before this for a number of years too. And yeah, I also used to find we get communication from listeners who listen to the show and say, well, actually I had that kind of experience as well, but I never spoke to anybody because I was scared they think I was mad. And they start to feel better to actually talk about their experiences. And sometimes we've had, of the old show I was involved in, guests would come on who'd heard other guests previously talk about an experience, and they'd say, can we come on and talk about ours, because ours fits what it's saying. Obviously that's more of a general thing about ghosts and UFOs, all those kind of things, but no, absolutely, people feel emboldened that they can talk about their experiences and not know they're not going to get laughed at.
That's it, isn't it? That's all I think that's all I've ever wanted to do. I had it so hard, and I refused to talk about it to people because I was just really worried that they were going to think I was absolutely mental. And it was just, you get to a certain stage in your life where you think, oh, I don't care anymore. I've got to go out and find some answers or I'm going to drive myself mad. So I'm beyond that now. People know my name's out there and you know it. And I have a lot of accounts that don't make it onto the map or onto YouTube because they're private accounts that people don't want to share with anybody else. So it just seemed a shame. I had all this private information and it was just going nowhere, if you get what I mean. I thought, this is all going to be lost when I pop my clogs. You know, none of this is going to be out there. So I just thought, well, let's just
hang on a moment, Deborah. Pop my clogs.
Pop me clogs.
For those in America, is when she kicks the bucket.
Yeah. When I depart to Summerlands, when I pop my clogs, I will, nobody will know this. So I thought, well, I'll just write it down. And the easiest way to write it down is to put pins on a map, and put the sighting behind it kind of thing. So that's all I've ever done, really. And then just as you say, people will hear one thing or read one thing, and then it's instantly, that happened to me, or something like that happened to me. Or I've got a friend who's too scared to talk to you. Will you talk to me about it first? So it can take many months for some of them to get the whole details out. Sometimes I'm pulling them out one sentence at a time. Yeah. And others, it comes rushing out, doesn't it? It's just, it just comes rushing out.
Mm-hmm. It's just a chance to finally speak. They'll grab that opportunity.
That's what it was like for me, I'll be honest. That's exactly what it was like for me. And I'm hoping with the radio show that similar kind of thing will happen. People, listeners that haven't heard of my subjects or me or something might go, well, actually, that rings a bell.
That would be the hope, certainly, and obviously that brings the possibility. Are you two planning to have guests on your show as well to talk about their experiences and their research?
I hope so. I hope if people are comfortable enough. I have a number of people that have already agreed to be on the show and said, oh, yeah, I don't mind, I'll come on and talk. I know lots of witnesses, and I also know lots of researchers as well, and people from across the globe that do a very similar thing. So, yeah, I think that would be the way to go, to let people come on and tell their story.
Excellent. Although I must admit, I haven't listened to you talking this evening, Deborah, and knowing Ronald quite well. I hope our guests can get a word in because you guys talk really well. It's excellent, yeah. It's definitely really going to work.
It's not working.
It's one of those things actually we've talked about before. It's doing radio, it can seem very easy and straightforward, and we're all kind of just flowing along nicely here, but there are some real car crash radio shows out there. You think, oh my god, what's going on there? So it's not as easy as we make it seem. So one of the things is getting people talking, and the fact that both you and Ronald are great talkers means it's going to be great fun for me doing all the editing to put the show together for you. So I'm looking forward to having the challenge of bringing it down to a 1 hour show, which is what we're going to start with, certainly. So that's absolutely going to be great fun to do that for definite. So we are going to be doing the first recording fairly soon. So it's down to good old Mr. Mark there to decide on the scheduling, but I imagine it'll be on sooner rather than later.
Well, once we work out some of the logistics, yeah, we can get the show up going here pretty soon. As soon as we know how often it's going to air, and we have some definitely openings in the calendar, so we're really looking forward to that. And I really enjoy listening to the two of you talking. I get to take a break a little bit tonight. And
it's been the Andy and Deborah show tonight. We've just sat back and we've both been talking to each other on Skype and just letting you go. It's fantastic.
I like people's stories and people's lives, so I'm really interested to know more about Andy, I'll be honest, because I've never been down the paranormal.
Oh, Andy's got a lot about Andy. Come on, Andy, tell her.
Well, my background is more the esoteric and the occult. As you mentioned before, I'm a writer. I have 3 books out at the moment, currently working on my 4th, but it's all sort of magic. I mean, I've got links to my show. I better plug my own show. And my own show, Radio Hermetica, goes out once a month, and it's our show that's dedicated to the occult and esoteric. So that's more my kind of background. But I've been investigating ghosts and supernatural for 30-odd years. I mean, obviously, on my first experience, I said when I was 10 years old, but certainly researching in earnest since my late teens, when I first got involved in sort of local stuff here, and then became involved with Andy Collins of the EarthQuest investigation group that were looking into some rather nefarious activity, shall we say, possible links with black magic rituals that were carried out to the local landscape back in the 1990s, 80s even. It all began really for there. But that's kind of my background. But I'm often free to admit the one area I don't know a lot about is cryptozoology. So I'm quite fascinated to listen into your show, because I'm not going to be on the show physically. I'm going to be doing the editing work afterwards. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys talk about. I mean, I've got to know Ronald quite well. We did a few shows together last year. And again, that's his real big bag, is cryptozoology stuff. So I found talking to him quite fascinating, and listening to the kind of couple of people he brought on to the show as guests. I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be an interesting area for me to delve into really for the first time. My thinking tends to be around sort of the folkloric, mythological stuff, that these things aren't necessarily fully corporeal. But as I said, in writing my book on witchcraft, I have hundreds and hundreds of stories in these books that are very real first-hand accounts of people's experiences of all sorts of supernatural beings that seem physically real, that really do things. I mean, the common ones like fairies who steal children away. I mean, you don't see Disney fairies doing that, but they're certainly the kind of stories. And these fairies are not nice creatures at all. You annoy them and they will take revenge upon you. Let's drag you into the underworld. So quite a different version to what you tend to see on TV. And a lot of these kinds of mythological creatures have been sanitized by people like Disney and turned into nice fluffy creatures. But even when you look at some of the things like Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, all those kind of stories, they've been sanitized by Disney. But if you go back to things like the Grimm's fairy tales and real fairy tales, they're very different stories, quite brutal and gruesome. Quite a lot of them are. And there's the stories that they've actually documented. And again, I've got their fairy tales and the Teutonic mythology, which is a much better collection of stories and myths that they collected. That's much harder to get hold of. But so to listen to you guys talking about these kind of crypto creatures and these sort of transhuman creatures and that kind of thing, I'm going to find absolutely fascinating and looking forward to tuning in.
There was always a wolf in the old stories, wasn't there? There was always this giant hairy wolf that would eat you if you went into the woods. And the Native Americans have a story about, I can't think of her name at the moment, and she was a hairy woman. She had a basket on her back and she would steal children in the woods. And there's an actual tale of like that in the southeast, and they call him the Leatherman, and it's a hairy man that comes with a basket on his back, and he throws children in it and steals them away. And it fascinated me that they're thousands of miles apart. You
are totally into my area as professionally now. I'm a psychotherapist, Jungian based, and Carl Jung was fascinated by this, the very fact of exactly that. Stories and myths from cultures and communities that were primitive around the world who had no connection, no communication, nothing, and yet were telling very similar stories exactly like that. And that began the notion of what he called the collective unconscious, that there is this deepest level of awareness where our minds interconnect, and these myths and stories are generated and come from that level of awareness. And I often think some of these creatures that we talk about here are coming from that level. So they're not necessarily physically there in front of you, but neither are you just imagining them. They exist at that level of our awareness. And it's only in certain situations and certain times and things like rituals, you get yourself in a certain mindset that you can then see and experience these things. And it goes back to what we said before about when you have an encounter, your mind is open to the possibility of those encounters. And you have that first encounter, you can either shut down completely and think, no, it's not there, don't want to know. Or you think, hey, there's something going on here, I want to find out more. Because you are seeing them the first time. You start to see them more and more because your mind is now open to that possibility. They've always been there, just you ain't seen them.
Well, there is that. That is one of the theories. It's a kind of a vibrational thing that when you're on a similar vibration, that's when you see and experience them. But it's just always fascinated me. I thought you got the same stories in Russia that you've got in England and you've got in America and Canada, and the same similar description of these upright, hairy hominids. That's always kind of been the draw for me. Because I'm thinking, well, other people are reporting very similar things to what I saw in a very similar way. I didn't see a body on mine, so I can't say that it had a human type body. I only saw it from like mid to stuff. So I'm only going off that 1.5 foot of thing that I saw. He just seemed to lean back into the greenery as if he was using the greenery to hide. It was like this completely natural movement when he did it, as if he blended with the tree somehow, kind of thing. And I always think, if I hadn't seen that movement, I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing. It's the actual fact that I saw him that's kind of driven me, made me go the way I've gone, looking for other people. I would have had a completely different life if I hadn't looked in that direction at that moment.
Oh, absolutely. It just begins that journey of fascination that takes you down the road to try and understand it. I mean, one of the things that brought me into working as a psychotherapist was trying to understand these experiences, because I wasn't going to go down the road that a lot of therapists might do, that it's always imagination, it's signs of neurosis, etc., etc. Yeah, some of the stuff is signs of neurosis, etc. There's no way getting away from that. But some of these experiences are definitely genuine and very real. There are these paranormal activities, these paranormal events definitely occurring. I think sometimes we get too caught up in trying to classify and identify and verify different theorems of what we think these things are. I mean, I've been investigating ghosts for 30 years. But I still don't have a coherent set theory of what I think they are, because I find no matter how broad a theory you come up with, how many variables you try and take into that theory, something always happens that doesn't fit the theory, and you think, oh, what the hell? You're back at square one. So when people say it's spiritual, if it's a ghost of a dead person, or it's something from another reality, it's a time slip, I don't know. I don't know if you can be that set in what you think these things are. They are them. They are things that happen that we don't really have an explanation for.
No, and that's why you have to offer as many theories as you can, because the minute that you say I know what it was, then you just, it's going to go stale, because my truth and your truth are completely different. So there's no point me saying to somebody in Suffolk, I know exactly what you saw and this is what it is, because I wasn't there. So it's better for me to say, don't tell me anything, you tell me what you saw and I will just use the words that you write. And because that's the only way that I can try and keep it as fair as possible. I don't want to put anything suggestive on them. The minute I say hairy, upright ape man, they're going to try and fit that to what they saw. Yes. And that's not what I want. If they saw quick black moving energy, I want them to say it was quick black moving energy. I don't want them to fit the mold. It's absolutely pointless. That will get me and everybody else nowhere. And people do see energy, don't they? They don't just see creatures.
Oh, God, yeah, absolutely.
All manner of things out there. Strange lights that you can see in the daytime, and mystery men turning up at every research area that you go to. This car's there every single time before you go, even though you haven't told anyone where you're going. There's all this kind of other phenomena that ripples out from the subject that you're interested in. You have to go down all these little lanes, don't you, and hope that at the end of the lane is an answer, and it's normally a shut gate, so you come back on yourself and you kind of start again.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things you tend to encounter a little bit, and it comes back to something you just said very briefly there that I find fascinating, is this idea that, that sort of secret agencies around the world are like observing what we're doing and they don't want us to find out the truth, blah, 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 blah. I think it's the other way around, I think they're leaving it to us to find out what the truth is, and they'll just grab it from us afterwards. These kind of dark, sinister conspiracies that know the truth of what's really going on and try and stop us knowing it. I think it's the other way around. I think they don't want to put the money and the effort, the research into it. They'll leave it to us to do all the legwork. And when we find interesting stuff, they want to spy on us to find out what we know. Not that we think we're closing in on what they know. It's just that they want to know what we think we know, because it's easier for them to not have to do the research, do the digging around themselves. You know what I mean? I've always think of it that way around. Now, I know people and friends who've had experiences like that where they've turned up at locations and suddenly there's mysterious vehicles there, and they think, do they know we're coming here? We haven't told anybody. Why are they here? And yet they seem to know. But I do think that they're being watched. Not often, occasionally, but not because they're trying to stop you knowing stuff, but they're trying to see what you find out. So then they'll take the information themselves. So it's like they're spying on us to find out what we found out, so then they could know what we know. But not because we're trying to stop us knowing stuff. You know what I mean? It's the other way around.
Yeah, what can they find out from us? I mean, I don't have any experience of that. I'll be honest, it hasn't happened to me at all. It's not something that's ever happened. People will say to me, oh, the government will do this or the government will do that. And it hasn't happened to me. And I've been at this a long time.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't think governments are that interested or involved. As I say, I think they want us to do the work. Then they'll sort of look in and see what we've found out. Not that they're trying to hide anything from us. It saves them doing the work. You know what I mean? It's that way around.
I've noticed some strange anomalies, but they are just anomalies. They're just like some of the sighting areas have now been bought and they are posted as private. Is it special areas of scientific interest?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's happened. But that could just be the coincidence of those areas were up for sale and there is something of scientific interest in there. And it's not happening in all of the areas. So, it's not something I can say, oh, that is a definite, government clamp down kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I must admit, in all the years I've been involved, I've never experienced anything directly like that anything an authority is trying to stop you being somewhere. I've had, we've had a few problems when sort of landowners and the like get a bit miffed. There's a site not far from me called the Running Well in Runwell in Essex, which is actually an ancient running well. It's a proper spring. And the guy who owned the farm that it's on the edge of, he was always very accommodating. He knew he had a public footpath going through the edge of his land. He didn't stop people day or night because, it was public land. It was public track. He sold the farm, and the guy that took over actually built 2 buildings right across the actual public highway, the footpath. That was the ancient footpath. And if you ever went along there and walked round onto his land either side, then he would call the police who were trespassing. And that was deliberate to stop people going to the Running Well. And even though we put in complaints to the Ramblers Association, which is the people who have to look after these things, and to the local authorities, saying this guy is deliberately blocking a public highway that's been open for hundreds of years, nothing was done about it. Absolutely nothing. On one occasion, a group of us went as a kind of a nighttime protest, went to walk through there, to go to the well and come back. When we got back to our cars, there were about 5 police cars around our cars, and the farmer had reported seeing us dressed in black cloaks with flaming torches, about to have a black mass ritual in the end of his farm. It's like, what?
Unbelievable, isn't it? Unbelievable. If he'd have phoned in and said, I've just seen someone climbing through my back window, they would have said, well, we can't come out, we're really busy, you're going to have to deal with it yourself.
Yeah,
they sent 5 out to see if you're having a druid ceremony.
Yeah, I know, it was black magic, flaming torches to work as far as his farm was concerned. It was utter rubbish. It was making it up, but they decided to come out and investigate. And so we got back to our cars.
I can imagine that 911 call here in the States, like, hello, I'd like to report that they're summoning Satan in my neighbor's property. Yeah, there's a big flame and the horns are coming up and everything. All that chanting's keeping me awake.
To me, it just seems like we don't. There's a similar situation up here where there are areas that we've walked for so long, and then all of a sudden the deer fences are up and you can't go into those areas. So that does put this thought in your head that why are they doing this in the woods? Probably landowners who don't want you on their property, but the rambling law state that we have a right, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
In the UK. So
the problem is, it doesn't get enforced anymore. So landowners can do that. You can do exactly that. You can block you access to such a perfect. I mean, I've been visiting the Running Well in Runwell, for decades. No problem at all until this guy sold the farm.
It's just, to me, I seen it this last month when I was in Scotland, where there's an area up there there's been lots of reports of this ginger R, we shall call it, this strange hairy creature that steals fish from the nets. And for some reason...
Did you say ginger hairy?
Yeah, ginger, completely covered.
Yeah, Mark, one of your ancestors.
No, but seriously, and there are the oldest reports of satyrs or man monkeys in that area. So it's a very interesting area for me. And I went up there and it was beautiful. Don't get me wrong. It was absolutely beautiful. And there was food everywhere. But everything was fenced off for the day. Everywhere you went was private land and you couldn't get out and you couldn't camp, or you couldn't get out and you couldn't walk on it. It's all to do with the bloody deer and the shooting.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Pheasants. So there was not, you were absolutely funneled into the tourist walking areas and were not encouraged to go off trail, which is no good when you're out looking for Bigfoot. He's not going to be sat on a trail waiting for you with sandwiches in it.
Well, I want to know why not. He actually should be.
Yeah. Well, that's what we wanted. We wanted to be around when the cull was on. The idea being that if they are coming in and eating these, creatures, let's get around there and get up there at this time of year. But it was just, it was seemed impossible. If you didn't go to the tourist places, you couldn't really get out of the car and walk anywhere. It was just everything was fenced off. Really
funnily enough, we had a very similar experience recently visiting Clapham Wood. I mentioned earlier on that a third of that wood has now been sold off and fenced off for pheasant shooting. So you can't get anywhere near that area now. And part of the area they've closed off is the area where it all first happened in the early 1970s when a friend of mine, Charles Walker, was first investigating supposed, first of all, UFO activity. So he thought in Clapham Wood, but then turned out to be something a little more sinister. But that area all began is now completely fenced off.
See, that plays into the government conspiracy theory there, Andy.
It does, that's the problem. But he's a private landowner, basically. The land was available for sale, he bought it, and he's turned it into a pheasant farm for shooting,
So that's yet another wood that I've heard of where there's been a sighting and then it's just been kind of fenced off. But that's what it is. It's all about the money. It's not really... Exactly. I don't think they're really trying to discourage us from going into areas because there are hairy wild people in them. I think it's down to just, I own this land and you will not come on it. And
I'm totally agree. That's very much my thinking, that a lot of the stuff you talk about, conspiracy stuff, they're not that bloody organised. We know what our government's like, especially couldn't fight to have a paper bag. I mean, we've not going down the politics road now, but there's certain political things happening in this country at the moment are a total bloody mess. So the idea that they can plan conspiracies and the like is like, no, they can't. It is about short-term.
Say it, Andy. Go on, say it.
Yeah. Well, you know what I'm talking about, Brexit. Yeah. But it's all short-termism. It's all what makes money right now. That's all governments care about, is feathering their own bleeding nest and filling their pockets until Jeremy Corbyn comes to power and it'll all change. But that's politics.
Well, we had somebody apply under the Freedom of Information Act. Yeah. Obviously, most people in the UK, I'm sorry I'm eating chocolate, know of Cannock Chase and the Cannock Chase werewolf.
Yes.
So a wonderful gentleman applied under the Freedom of Information Act to see how many accounts from Cannock Chase were reported to the government. And you have to put in a list of words like beast, werewolf, upright hairy man, that kind of thing. So he sent us this list of figures, and if I'm correct, I think it was about 865, something ridiculous like that. But all in all, it was 1,500. But that's just a general word search. So it's not 1,500 accounts. It's 1,500 times those words have hit.
It could be one account that's written a very long-winded account, of course.
So when we see the breakdown and beast has been reported 68 times, you get quite excited at that. You think, this is a report made to the police. 12 werewolf reports made to the police. Within 15 hours, those figures were pulled back and we were not allowed to use them. Because they checked every single one of those 15,000 words and none of it was relevant. In 17 hours?
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. But yeah, that kind of feeds into the government conspiracy thing. So now they've said, if we want to apply under the Freedom of Information Act, we have to say, was there a hairy hominid sighted in Oxfordshire on the 27th of June 1962? Which is impossible to do, isn't it? So that's that closed down.
But again, it's can they be bothered to look for this?
Yeah, it's like, well, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Not going to shut you down because it's dark conspiracy shut down because they can't be bothered with it. But Cannock Chase is one that I want to do a bit investigate about myself. I mean, I know we're running short of time now, but it's an area that has so many things reported in. You're thinking, like, what is it, the Bermuda Triangle? It's a very strange place. It's either a very strange place or it's become, because it's had a few strange experiences noted, that it's now become a magnet for lots of people to go investigate. So, of course, the more people go investigate places, the more stuff gets found because people are investigating those places. So it becomes self-fulfilling almost. So I find that fascinating.
It's not just a chase. It's like Rugeley, Gentleshire, Heath Hayes. It's areas around the chase as well that have these. When they tend to put everything that happens in that circle in Staffordshire as Cannock Chase, if you get what I mean. But we have like the Rugeley accounts, these other places there. So you can kind of see these. I think I haven't got my figures on me right at this minute. I wish I had, but it was something about the areas must be special because we started building on it centuries ago. When we built the Castle Ring, and nobody's really sure who built that. And then the first kind of hairy man accounts come out of Cannock Chase in the 1880s, I think, if I'm correct, 1885, something like that. And the first account of a gentleman who sees a hairy upright hominid close to the Castle Ring. And as you say, there are so many researchers out. You've got the paranormal researchers, the UFO people, you've got Bigfoot researchers, werewolf researchers, black-eyed kids, Slender Man, you name it, it's been seen at Cannock Chase.
That's what I find suspicious. And I'll be honest with you, and I don't care if this is going to annoy somebody, I won't name names, but when I looked into this about 4 years ago, when the Cannock Chase started to really come to the surface, the same name kept coming up time and time again. And I thought, you are either deliberately pushing this or you're just grabbing every little straw of strangeness that you find and rushing to the local press with it. Because this person's name, I won't name them, it came up time and time and time again. I thought, this is getting a bit strange. Why does it always come back to you, you one person?
It's just, I wonder if, it's a chase. So it's a chase means that there's always been deer in the area. That's why it's been called a chase. It's a place where we have hunted deer. I think some of them may be people out at night, teenagers, had a drink, you see the eye shine, or the eye shine of an owl, and that becomes this monster that it lives in that area. Like we were talking about before with the power of suggestion.
Yes.
Yeah, alcohol can do a hell of a lot of things.
Oh, yes.
And Deborah, we're going to have to come to an end here. Okay, people, you have been listening to the Paranormal UK radio show with your hosts this week, Andy Mercer and Deborah Hatswell, while Mark and I have been sitting back, scoffing. Oh, Mark, I think, has been hunting bears, and I've been sitting here drinking tea and sucking on grapes. Over to you, Mark. Close it off.
Guys, I've just been sitting back and just listening to this show, and it's been fascinating. Deborah, you and Ron's show coming up is going to be great. I almost think you and Andy both need to have a show together.
Yeah, I do. I do. I think that's the future.
Well, I'll do you a deal. I'll come on as a guest on you and Ron's show at some point for definite. So
I would like that very much.
Then Ron won't be able to get a word in edgewise.
The three of us, it'll be a nightmare.
We'll have to have a talking stick. We'll pass it around.
Right. So coming up in the near future is Deborah Hatswell and Ron Murphy's new show. Andy, what's it called?
We agreed on the crypto show, I do believe.
A Crypto Realm.
Crypto Realm.
Crypto Realm, that's it. I do apologize.
That's it, the Crypto Realm. So that's Crypto Realm, and that's coming soon, so we will let you know the date of that. And also, when's Ron Murphy's show Inside the Goblin Universe coming back, Mark?
Probably as next month. I got to talk with Ron and work out the details, but yeah, we'll be putting that back into the schedule here soon too.
Okay. All right. That's it.
Really?
Off you go, Mark. Yeah, you can take it now.
We all done now?
Yes.
Oh, darn. I was enjoying it so much. Well, Andy and Deborah, I want to thank you both for coming on. This has been a very enjoyable show with a great topic. And I know we really didn't really plan this show out this way, but it worked out perfectly. But again, thank you both. You're both highly entertaining to listen to.
Yeah. Mark and I enjoyed our relaxation.
and I think it's... And Andy, let's but who can speak for England more?
Yes, true. And Andy, let's plug your show too. You're also the host of Radio Hermetica, which airs the second Thursday of every month here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Absolutely.
And where can you find the Paranormal UK Radio Network? Everywhere.
TalkStream Live, TuneIn Radio, and Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher.
iBooks.
Yep.
YouTube.
Okay.
Yep. Everywhere.
All right, we're out of time. Everybody have a great evening, and we will catch you next week. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.